Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my palette panning projects update. If you're new to my channel, I am working on two panning projects that focus on eyeshadow palettes. The first is a pan that palette that is based on usage, so I have been working on hitting every shade in my Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Volume 1 palette 10 times this year, and the other project is a no palette left behind style project where I'm trying to use every palette in my collection 3 times before the end of the year. So in this video, I will be updating you on my usage on both of these projects from March and April. I typically update these every month, but due to some extenuating circumstances, I wasn't really using my palettes in March, and so I took April to kind of catch up and get a little bit more progress. So I'm gonna start by talking you through my Pan That palette for this year. As I mentioned, it's the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Volume 1 palette. And I'm gonna try to move pretty efficiently in this video for 2 reasons. The first is that these palette panning project updates can get really long if I'm not careful. And the second is that there's been some mowing going on outside this morning and they seem to have stopped, but I'm terrified that they're gonna start back up again right as I'm filming this video. So I'm gonna try to move quickly through my usage and my Morphe and Jaclyn Hill palette from March and April. I'm gonna start, as I always do, with the top left corner of the palette and then move row by row and just let you know which shades I used in March and April and where I am in my total uses to date on those shades. So the shade in light I used 4 times, which brings me to 12 total uses to date. So I have hit my 10 use goal on that shade for the year. Beam I used 11 times, which brings me to 18 total uses this year. So I've obviously hit my 10 use goal for that shade as well. I've been trying to hit pan in this shade just as kind of an experiment to see how many uses it actually takes to hit pan. And I have to say these pans are a lot deeper than I thought they would be. You would think after the 18 uses this year alone, plus all of the times that I've used this shade previously, that I would have hit pan by now, but apparently these shades are harder to hit pan on than I even realized. So that is good information to know, and I am glad, again, I think I say this every month, but I'm very glad that I did not try to hit pan in any of these shades as my goal, and I decided to go for the 10 uses instead, because I just think hitting pan in these is going to take a very long time. The shade Silk Cream I used 5 times in March and April, which brings me to 10 total uses this year, which means I have completed my goal in that shade. I used MFEO 6 times in March and April, which brings me again to 10 total uses to date, and I have hit my goal. The shade Faint I used 5 times in March and April, so I am at 8 total uses to date. The shade Sissy I've used 1 time in March and April, which means I've only gotten 2 uses on this to date. Little Lady I used 6 times in March and April, which means I've got 7 total uses to date. Moving now to the second row, I used Creamsicle 2 times for a total uses of 2 times to date. The shade Butter I used 4 times in March and April, which brings me to 7 total uses. The shade Pooter I used 6 times in March and April, which brings me to a total uses of 10 uses, so I've hit my goal on that shade as well. I used Pukey twice in March and April, which brings me to 6 total uses. And then the last 3 shades in this row, Hunts, Firework, and Queen, all have the exact same amount of uses, so I'll just update all of them at once. I used each of those 3 shades 1 time each, and each of them only have 2 uses on them to date. Moving to the third row, I used the shade Obsessed 6 times, which brings me to 11 total uses, so I've hit my goal on that one as well. SBN I used 3 times in March and April for a total of 4 uses. Hillster I used once in March and April for a total of 2 uses to date. Roxanne and Jax, I used both of those shades twice in March and April, and they both have total uses of 3 times each. I think these are both shades that I used in my palette bingo with this palette. I'll have that linked in the cards and in the description box in case you'd like to go back and watch that video. It was really fun to randomly generate some shades from this palette and try to create an eye look. The shade Buns I used 4 times in March and April for a total of 6 uses to date. And I'm skipping over Crayon Apple because I did not use that one since the last update. Second to last row, I used the shade Royalty twice for a total uses of 2 times so far. Twerk I used once for a total uses of 1. Hustle I used 3 times for a total of 4 uses to date. I'm skipping over Meeks and 24/7 because I did not use those since the last update. Chip I used twice in March and April for a total of 4 uses so far. Mocha I used 4 times in March and April for a total uses of 7 so far. And then the last row, starting with Pool Party and Jada, I used both of those once in March and April, and they both only have 1 use so far. Diva and Enchanted, I used both of those shades once as well, and they both have a total of 2 uses so far. Central Park I used 3 times in March and April for a total of 4 uses overall. Soda Pop I used once in March and April for a total of 3 uses. And Abyss I used once for a total of 4 uses to date. So I have officially met my 10 use goal on Enlight, Beam, Silk Cream, MFEO, Pooter, and Obsessed, which is 6 shades out of a 35 shade palette, which means I have plenty of work left to do this year. But there are quite a few shades that are really, really close. The shade Faint has 8 uses already. Butter has 7. And Mocha has 7 as well. So those are some that I can get to my goal on pretty quickly here. And overall, I'm still enjoying using this palette, which I'm counting as a win because when I've done Pan That palettes where I'm actually trying to hit pan in the palette, I have felt pretty burnt out by this time of year. I still feel confident that I can get to my 10 use goal on every shade, but I know it's going to take a little bit of a push and a little bit of extra effort, especially for some of these shades that are a little bit more difficult for me in terms of putting looks together for everyday wear. But overall, I'm still feeling pretty good about my progress, even though I have only met my goal in 6 shades and I haven't hit any pans. That's okay. In terms of goals, I had a goal at the last update to use every shade at least once, and I was able to achieve that goal. So I think I'm going to set a goal to hit my 10 use benchmark in those 3 shades that I mentioned. So Faint, Butter, and Mocha. Go ahead and knock those out so they will be at my goal for the rest of the year. I think it would be wise to set another goal for the shades that I've only used once to make sure that I'm focusing in on those. So shades I've only used once are Cranapple, Pool Party, Twerk, Jada, Meeks. Is that all? Yeah, so Cranapple, Twerk, Pool Party, Jada, and Meeks. That's 5 shades that I've only used 1 time. Meeks should be no problem at all because that's just like a really nice brown, bronzy shimmer, but the other ones might be a little bit more of a stretch. We've got Cranapple, which is a red, Pool Party and Jada, which are blue shades, Twerk, which is like a deeper bluey purple. But if I could try and focus on getting some more use on those, I think I would be in a better spot to be closer to hitting 10 uses on those. And those will be my goals for the next update. So plenty of eyeshadow still left to work on. Wish me luck on this journey to 10 uses in every shade in this palette. All right, so moving swiftly onto my No Palette Left Behind project. Again, I'm going to be updating you on which palettes I used in March and April since the last update. So in March and April, I used 15 of my palettes, and I will try to insert some footage or a photo of each of the palettes, what they're looking like, and also let you know how many times I used them. So I used my Patrick Ta Major Dimension eyeshadow palette 1 time for a total of 2 times so far. So I'm very, very close to my 3 use goal on this palette. Should be really easy to get another use out of this one. This is one of the palettes that I'm going to be sad to hit my 3 use goal on because it's a palette that I just absolutely love and could use every single day. So if I exceed the 3 uses, it's not a big deal, but yeah, I have to kind of restrain myself from wanting to reach for this palette all the time. I used my Kaleidos Escape Pod once since the last update, and I've only used it once so far in this project. One of the goals that I set in my last update was to use more of my quads, and I did try to focus on that earlier in March, and I did use quite a few of my quads, but not all of them yet. So I used the Tom Ford Honeymoon quad 1 time, and I've only used it once so far in the project. I used my Tom Ford Body Heat quad once, and I've only used this one once so far in the project as well. And I used my Tom Ford Suspicion Quad once since the last update for a total use of 1 time this year. I also hit my goal on my BH Cosmetics Low Key Love You palette. I have here that I used it 4 times since the last update, but I know for a fact that I used it way more than that because I was working really hard on hitting pan in the shade DTR. But I guess my brain just said, hey, we've hit our 3 use goal. Let's just stop tracking. But I know I have hit my 3 uses for sure on this one, plus some because I was able to hit a pan in this palette. I also used my BH Cosmetics Hangin' in Hawaii palette. I used this one 3 times in March and April for a total of 3 times so far this year. So I hit my goal on this one as well and absolutely loved every time I use this palette. I always forget how much I love my BH Cosmetics palettes until I pull them out and start using them again. And this one is just such a stunning color story for summertime and for every day. Loved it. I used my Natasha Denona Gold palette twice in March and April, so I have reached my 3 use goal on this one. And I used my Natasha Denona Mini Gold palette 1 time since the last update, and that is the only time I've used it so far this year. I used both my Oden's Eye Sea Talk and my Oden's Eye Florist Story palettes 3 times since the last update, and they both have 4 total uses on them because I've now uploaded 3 videos total on these palettes, so I'll have those linked in the description box if you haven't seen them yet. So I've hit my goal on both of these palettes, and they are also some of the newest palettes in my collection. 2 other newer palettes in my collection, the e.l.f. Love You a Latte Bite-Sized Eyeshadow Palette and the e.l.f. Rosewater. Do we call them palettes or quads? I think they're quads. So I got Love You a Latte and Rosewater. I bought these in sort of an emergency travel situation in March. And so I was able to hit my goal on both of them. I used both of them 3 times, and so I've hit my 3 uses on both of these palettes. I've heard about these palettes for years, and this was my first time trying them, and I was really pleasantly surprised that they lived up to the hype. So yeah, if you're ever in a bind and you need a quick eyeshadow, I would recommend picking up the e.l.f. Bite-Sized Quads for sure. And then finally, 2 more newer palettes. I used the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette twice in March and April for a total of 2 uses so far this year. I picked this one up recently at Marshall's, and I have been really enjoying it. This is my first time trying the Too Faced palettes. I think this is my first Too Faced palette ever, but definitely my first time trying a Too Faced palette in the tin packaging, which people always rave about, and I have really been enjoying. And then lastly, I used the Tarte Tartelette in Bloom palette twice in March and April for a total of 2 uses to date. This is another one that is old news in the beauty world, but is new to me. I was actually sent some products from Dermstore, and this is available on the Dermstore website. So I was lucky enough to be gifted this palette. I've always wanted it. I've always wanted to try it, and I've really been enjoying it so far. So that brings my total palette collection to 56 palettes, which is more than we started with this year. And I have hit my 3 use goal on 12 of those palettes. So again, I've got my work cut out for me here, but I'm very, very close to 3 uses on a lot of the other palettes in my collection. The Pat McGrath Celestial Divinity for one, I've already got 2 uses on that. The Patrick Ta Major Dimension, as I already talked about. My Beauty Bay Wilderness palette, which is actually what's on my eyes today, is so close. I've got 2 uses on it, so I can easily get that one done for the next update. The Natasha Denona Mini Star has 2 uses on it. My Glamlite Barbie palette has 2 uses on it. So I have the potential to have a lot more palettes completed in this project by the next update, and so that is what I'm going to be working on. I am a little bit nervous because I'm doing a bit of traveling here and there this summer. I don't know if I want to travel with my big huge Morphe palette the whole time, although that would make the most sense to bring a palette with me that I knew I would, be getting a lot of usage on. But I'm not sure that's the brightest idea for like taking on a plane and stuff. So I'm gonna have to think on what palettes I want to travel with that would also help me get some progress on these projects. Let me know if you have any recommendations for that down below. Have you ever traveled with the Jaclyn Hill and Morphe palette in a carry-on suitcase? And was it successful? I feel like this is a very niche question slash experience, but if anyone would know, it would be the people who watch my videos. Anyway, they are back to mowing outside, so I guess that's my cue to leave it there for today. I know this is sort of like a number and data heavy video every time, but hopefully you still enjoyed watching it, seeing some more of the palettes in my collection, the palettes that I've added most recently to my collection, and also catching up on my progress with my palette panning projects for 2023. If you are looking for more panning content, I do have a panning playlist, which I'll link for you down below, and that has all of the projects that I'm working on this year in one place where you can go and watch all through those videos if you haven't seen them yet. I feel like I might be finally caught up on project update videos, so my next video is gonna be a surprise to both you and to me. So stay tuned for that. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and give the video a like if you liked it. I will look forward to seeing you in my next one. Bye!